Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Billingsley of the Columbus chapter of Conscious Capitalism, and I'm here with a very influential business leader in the Columbus area and someone who I've had the pleasure to collaborate with and really learn from over the past couple of years and how he conducts business, how he runs business, his passion for it. Mr. Keith Stevens, how are you today, sir?
I'm great, Matthew. How about yourself?
I cannot complain at all. Cannot complain. Thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. And while you say you've learned from me, I've learned from you as well. So it's been quid pro quo, right?
For sure. A little give and take there. So yeah, I'd like to start from the beginning, man. I know a little bit about this, but just want to hear from you. Like, what got you into running your own business, and what were some of the things that you looked out for that you wanted to achieve, what you wanted to avoid, and starting Proteam Solutions, or even beyond that, even before that.
Yeah. So I actually got talked in. So going back, there was a couple stop starts to trying to run a company, and I wasn't fully committed. Like a lot of people, really worried about how am I going to eat, right? That's always a question. And where do I live? So those couple stop starts didn't materialize, but I knew there was a bug inside of me that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I felt going back to when I was very young, carrying papers, that bug was planted in, and possibly it could even be part of my DNA because I've got family. My father, his brothers, all were entrepreneurs. So with respect to Protein, the actual name we started with was Team 2000. And I started in 1992 with the idea that if we had to change the name because we made it to the year 2000, that would be a good problem, right? And fortunately, we did make it. The initial vision for the organization, though, was to bring work opportunities to Central City residents, urban areas where people had been deemed hardcore unemployable, typically by virtue of the press, the media, and what they reported on in those communities, which was maybe 5% of what was going on. The other 95% was really solid people, families who wanted the same thing anyone else wants. They wanted the American dream, wanted to see their kids go to college, et cetera. But for whatever reason, they felt, they didn't have access to the employment market. So we started there and we grew really quickly. One of the things we introduced was transportation. At one point, we had 15 vans. All of them would carry 15 passengers and 450-passenger buses. And that differentiated us from our competition. Companies used to call 4 and 5 staffing firms to hope to get the number they needed. When they called us, they got the number. And so it was a real differentiator for us. We grew rapidly. We went from, 75,000 the first quarter we were in business to 8 million 8 years later. So we were progressing about 1 million a year. And as always happens, Matthew, your path can sometimes be, I won't say disrupted, but it changes based on client demand, based on opportunity. And we pivoted from doing a lot of light industrial staffing into more professional staffing, HR, accounting, administrative support staff, et cetera. That was 2001, 2002. We continued that on. And then in 2008, the recession hit and it really caught me off guard. I didn't see that one coming. It almost took us out and made a decision then to pivot 100% into technology. It was the value proposition around tech was much higher. You weren't seen as a commodity, and so that's kind of been the path since then. And that my journey. What I think's differentiated me. I don't have an MBA. I didn't have a huge network at that point. It was just hustle. It was just and I would tell our team that, and I would hire people from the neighborhoods we served. We actually at one point had 8 offices, and all of them were situated in those areas that we hear about on the news today, where killings are happening, right? And so I told our staff, one thing we can do, we can outwork anybody we come up against. We can get up early, stay late. We were 24/7, 365, and again, another differentiator for us. So that's kind of the journey to here. Along the way, I didn't step on a landmine that took us completely out, but I stepped on some. I got shrapnel in my brain right now from some of those landmines, right? But those were great learning experiences for me, and they weren't lessons I needed to repeat. So I got the lesson the first time. I think what dawned on me, I use an executive coach that helped me to start working on the business and not in the business. And that's been the key to success for the past few years, that we can actually do different things and I can be involved in those, but I'm not so far down in the weeds that I can't add any value. So that's kind of been the path. That was probably a longer answer than you were looking for.
No, that's great. That's great. A couple things I heard from that, hustle for one. I think that's one of the through lines that from a lot of business leaders and entrepreneurs that we hear about a lot. But something else that early on that I heard in that story was innovation, something to get ahead of your competition by just, little things that can be considered innovation. Like, is that something that and I know a little bit about, what's going on now. We can talk about that in a second, but the idea of innovation, like I feel like you put a big value on that and, figuring out, what's the next thing to kind of, to carry the business, the company, the organization to another level. How much of a value do you put on that and finding what that next innovative thing is?
Well, the way you put it, it sounds like it's a very positive thing, and I think it is personally. But for those around me, it oftentimes has been hard to swallow because I embrace change and look for it, and I am. The word is innovation. I didn't know that word or associate that word with what we were doing back then. It was just how do we compete, right?
Right.
And how do we compete and win? So, it was the vans. It was our offices became social service centers. And what I mean by that is people would gather in our office in the morning. We gave away coffee, oftentimes donuts, and we had this camaraderie in each office that took on the culture of that office and the office staff. And it was really about engaging people and our piece was, listen, we understand what happens in this neighborhood. We know some of you have had some challenges. Leave that here. It'll be here in the office when you get back. When we go out to these client sites, we need you to go out there and do your work. And I got to say, we owe so much to those people in those neighborhoods who believed in us. And some of them had never worked before. Some of them were struggling with substance abuse. Some of them were suffering from domestic violence. I mean, it ran the gambit. But when they came in our office, they felt like a part of. And when they got on those vans to go to work, man, they went out and did yeoman's work on our behalf. So, yeah, innovation for sure, and it continues. And I've been told that I have vision, and I think I believe that, but I've also been told that I chase shiny stuff. So it's kind of what's the balance between that? I think I've developed a lot of discipline, so I don't chase everything that I think is an opportunity. But yeah, the idea of innovation and transformation is deep within me, and it doesn't matter what type of business it is. It could be a janitorial company, a plumber. I just see things and see opportunities for them to maybe deliver what they do in a more appropriate and efficient way.
Right. So you said earlier about, putting the offices in, the neighborhoods where, the people, the workers are, and making it more efficient for them, just making it more comfortable, just more economical, whatever the word may be. Fast forward to where we are now in 2021, and the whole thing of companies recognizing and understanding the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. As a Black business owner, I would love to hear you talk about what that means to you for your business and other organizations that you're helping. Like how important, like how much of a value do you put on that? Like how important is that to you?
Well, it's very important. And let me just give you one more kind of idea we had, and that was if we opened up in those communities, Matt, they couldn't keep walking by our office and not come in, right? So we took away excuses in a lot of cases and made people feel comfortable that they could go out and they could perform and they could be successful. But yeah, it's very important. And so I am involved in some initiatives that are really around that very piece. So I'm on the mayor's resiliency and recovery committee, and we've been tasked with providing initiatives and policy recommendations to the city on how they can move the city forward in various areas. I'm on what's called the development committee or work group. And we're looking at workforce for sure. That's a big challenge, and especially in those corridors, much like the same ones we served, 15, 20 years ago. Those problems still exist in that opportunity doesn't flow in there the same way it does other zip codes, if you will, right? So we're working on that. We're looking at transportation. We're looking at daycare. We're looking at all those things to potentially provide solutions to. And just for anyone that might be watching this, while I love the public sector, the thing I like about this is the city doesn't plan to do it. They plan to take those initiatives and contract with people that actually can get that work done. Because I think oftentimes our public sector organizations, the intentions are good, but the reality of their ability to have the bandwidth, the expertise, et cetera, to actually execute is sometimes challenging. So I'm really happy about that. We're working with the Urban League around some of the initiatives. I sat on a committee that actually was giving away CARES Act dollars to small, in most cases struggling, Black and Brown owned companies. I just stepped down as the chair of the Columbus Chamber, but while chair, we stood up a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that actually has now brokered a deal with the Urban League, and we're giving 30 Black owned companies free memberships and access to the Columbus Chamber, which could be truly game changing for them. So yeah, I'm involved. I think it's important. My concern, and I think I'm not the only one that feels this way, is there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of initiatives. You see companies elevating people that look like you and me to, from director to VP or senior VP of DE&I, and that reaction oftentimes is just that. It's a reaction. There's no long-term strategy around that to actually deliver results, right? We need something that's sustainable over time. I feel better than ever just because there's a significant amount of young people that are involved in this conversation. But yeah, and I'll say this, I think Columbus is doing better than some other cities that we play in. I think the public-private sector partnerships are happening. The Columbus partnership has got a huge initiative around DE&I and looking at how they can really change the game and it'll not just be lip service, right? So I'm encouraged. I'll say that I'm encouraged. I think for us in the tech space, the challenge we're having is finding people that look like us to take some of those high-paying, very sustainable technology jobs, right? And so I'm working with the National Center for Urban Solutions. They're doing a boot camp of sorts, getting ready to work with color-coded labs and Doug and those guys over there. So we have a need, and here's a real quick story. The CIO of AEP, I reached out to her to offer up service. They're a client of ours in one of our business units, but another one is all around software engineering. And so I reached out to the CIO. I sent her a picture of our engineers and our architects, and I'm all proud, and I think she's going to be super impressed. And she hit me back with, "Where are the women?" And there was not one woman. We've got 23 people. There's some men of color, but no females. And I had nothing. There's nothing I could say other than, I mean, we have relationships with these organizations, but they're still ramping up and creating that pipeline, right? So we had to go back to the drawing board. But yes, I think I'm hopeful. I think that there are opportunities out here. I saw something yesterday. It was really around cancel culture and just what people who may not agree with this movement, what they're saying, and that's a little disconcerting for me that they don't really see the need, the value, and that it's really something that's way behind its time, right? So,
Well, taking them back to conscious capitalism, some of the ethos that we share. You are someone who I look to as someone who's really trying to fulfill a purpose in business. Pretty much what like CC is doing. Trying to create a world where business is and can be recognized as a force for good. And in my years of getting to know you and working with you and understanding who you are as a business leader and as a man, you are someone who I look to as someone who is going to roll their sleeves up and get the job done. If not, find a plan to get the job done. So you are a doer as well as a visionary, which I respect highly. Given all that, talk about what's happening this year and beyond with PSI and some of the things that you're looking to work on and looking to accomplish coming out of a topsy-turvy weird 2020.
Well, the irony is PSI had a great year in 2020. We actually increased over 2019, but we didn't. We came under budget for 2020. So kudos to our team for that. I think the fact we're playing in that tech space and we saw the majority of our clients, if not all, were very comfortable with the contractors and consultants we had working on site with them, moving to a remote scenario, which really saved us but I think they had to. And I think, the other cool thing about that, it exposed organizations and their infrastructure, their tech debt, et cetera. But PSI had a good year. I think I alluded earlier to the software engineering offer that I gave to the CIO of AEP. That's an organization called Cave. It's a San Francisco-based software engineering firm that I own 49% of, with a former employee, someone I hired out of OSU, who's just absolutely went out and balled out in San Francisco. And so we're having a lot of fun. Last year in 2020, we grew by 600%. So
Wow.
and the reason for that is the appetite for remote development. The Cave is a remote first organization and was from its inception. Selling that in the Midwest was challenging simply because organizations wanted someone sitting in a cubicle that they could look at and assume and feel that they were getting their money's worth. So that changed. And then most recently, there's another organization. I don't really want to mention the name because we haven't gone to market yet, but it's really around process improvement and really focused primarily in the nonprofit space. We've had a process improvement business model we've stood up right after the 2008 recession. And it came about taking a look at what we did. I think I mentioned we moved into technology 100%, but there was some value around the expertise and experience we had around doing payroll 24/7, 365. So we looked at that and tried to look at where we could maybe sell that expertise. And we found an opportunity with the city of Columbus to help nonprofits with their internship programs and put those interns on our payroll, alleviating the nonprofit from having that headache. That business has done steadily well over the past 10 years. And probably a year and a half ago, I started to have some conversation with some people close to me. Matt, I think you were one of those, just bouncing the idea of expanding the service to the nonprofits to include some of the areas that they need support, but can't always afford based on budget constraints. And so that is one I'm really excited about. I think the opportunity to give back. And for me, the mantra has always been, you got to give to give again, right? So it's about giving without any expectation. And trust me, universal law, God, whatever you believe in, I believe in reciprocity. The word I want to say, and it comes back to you, right? And so 100% committed is part of our core values. And that's not something that'll ease up. I left the chair of the Alvis board yesterday. I was chairing two boards at the same time, like an idiot, but had a great time, learned a lot, and I think added a lot of value to both organizations. So that's over with now. And now I've got some bandwidth back to now focus on whatever that next thing is in terms of community support. I mentor people that want to get into business or who are early stage businesses as much as I can. So to that point, it's part of the DNA of me. I'm grateful as heck to be where I'm at, and I don't have a college degree. I'm a sales guy from way back, and along the way, got some opportunities from people and maximize those opportunities. So just real blessed to be where I'm at today.
Amazing. I want to leave you with this. If you can talk about someone in your life and your professional development who you value as an influence, either now that you look up to or someone in the past who really opened your eyes and set you on the journey where you are now. Talk about that person if that person's out there.
Yeah, I think he's out there. I don't know if he'll be watching this, but when I mentioned having a paper route when I was 16, and I had a paper route. I lived in South Linden. I lived on 21st. My route was 19th and 20th Avenues. And I had a customer on 20th Avenue that I hated going to his house to collect. And every week you had to collect because they had babies in there and it just smelled like diapers, right? And that I couldn't hardly take it, but I'd hold my nose, not literally, to get paid. But then one day, playing with some guys just out romping around, noticed in the back of his house there was a step van, and it had Willis Beauty Supply on the side.
Mm.
And lo and behold, found out that this guy had bootstrapped a beauty supply company and was working it out of his truck. Okay, 16 years old, life goes on. 21, 22, I'm introduced to him through another friend, and I go work for him to sell. And I'm selling to the beauty shops and barbershops around the city. And I got a firsthand look at business and how you take in more than you spend, but more importantly, the whole customer service piece. And then I think most importantly, it was watching a Black man be successful. And the other cool thing, he had his family involved, and they got along and they grew the business and they did remarkably well. So he was a huge influence for me. And then lastly, I'd have to say, just going back to my dad died when I was 8, and my mother went from a stay-at-home mom to being mom and dad, paid her way through college, got a job at the government, and just her hustle and her values and the way she figured things out was probably the thing that set me up the most. Now, I don't know about you. When you're young, you don't necessarily appreciate those lessons until later in life, right? And then I've got one more, if you don't mind, that I'd like to share.
Please, please.
My uncle, so I grew up in Urbana, Ohio, and we would spend the summers on my uncle's farm. My uncle had a farm that was a working farm, and he had another one he leased out to someone else that actually grew crops on it. And we're young and working with our uncle. My uncle had one arm, right? He had one of his arms was cut off in a washing machine factory where he worked. So he worked this farm with one arm, and I watched him grabbing these 50, 100-pound bags of feeding pigs, and we were working right along with him. One lesson I got from him, Matthew, is we would sleep in the living room in the summer because it was hot. We'd have the door open. And I remember one day waking up, and there's my uncle, buck naked, walking with his clothes under his good arm, going out to the front porch. And he got dressed on the front porch, and I watched him, and it was as if he was breathing in his property. He was breathing in just the elements, and that ownership is what I saw in him, right? And that was a lesson that came back to me later in life that I really appreciated. So those are three. There's been others that have along the way have made contributions, and I owe some sort of homage to, but those are three that stand out.
Yeah, that story about your uncle is, that's just pride personified, right? And in the
Yeah.
most honest, salt of the earth way, just taking it all in and just, basking in what he's accomplished. That's a really cool one. I think I've heard that story before. I'm glad you shared that one again. That was great. Keith, I want to thank you for doing this. I know you, with your bandwidth and everything you got going on there, I really appreciate you taking time to sit down with me for these 20, 30 minutes just to share some of these insights. It was super helpful. And I want to thank you.
Well, listen, thank you, Matt. And I think Conscious Capitalism is a great organization. I have a good friend, John Lowe, that's involved here locally. And some of the other individuals that are part of this process, I think Jackie Bickle is potentially so you guys are doing great things. If my bandwidth should ease up and I've got some, it may be something that I might want to potentially get more involved with. But thank you for asking me, man. I appreciate you. You are an awesome guy, man, professionally mature. You got great people skills. You've got just a great manner about yourself, man. And I think that's why we vibe. I've got a no a-hole rule, right? And you meet that test. You're not that.
Well, that's the bare minimum, right? That's the bare minimum. If you can't clear that, then that's nothing you can do. So awesome. Well, thanks again, Keith.
All right, brother.